So hello and welcome everybody to our ninth and last training network of researchers for citizen science training for the year 2024. We are now, I think, close to or over 250 members, and we only started late last year, which has been an amazing accomplishment to gather so many members from different fields of research, different career stages, but everybody interested in the field of citizen science, either as a novice or experienced personnel. And so today we are going to be speaking about impact assessment in citizen science. And we are joined by two members, one from the ECS, which is European Citizen Science Project, Barbara Kieslinger, and also one of our network members, Tarcísio. Yeah, I was trying to pronounce your full name, but I'll stop here before I butcher it. But you're
It's
welcome.
perfect.
Thank you. So Clea, if you could briefly introduce our speakers, and then we'll begin with their respective talks. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to check if Barbara can hear us and also speak. Hi, Barbara. Let me see, because there seems to be some issues. Maybe let's give it a bit of a moment for Barbara, the connection. And I'm very happy maybe to hear a bit from, I don't know, Pankaj or Laura, who have their video on, or anyone else, even Mercy. I just heard you defended your PhD, so congratulations. But maybe you could briefly introduce yourselves, work, and tell us if you work with citizen science or not.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Claire. Indeed, I just defended on the 7th October, so very fresh. And I was doing my PhD on a study in Uganda and DRC. So I was following two citizen science projects implemented in these countries and trying to understand how citizen science could work in places like Uganda and DRC, broadly framed as low and middle income countries in my thesis. And this was at KU Leuven in Belgium, together with the African Museum in Tervuren in Belgium. Yeah.
Thank you, Mercy. If you want to share your PhD with us, link on this chat, please go for it. It's really nice. Laura, what about you?
Hi, hello. Well,
Hi.
This is my first time here. It's a pity that is the last reunion of this year, but well, I'm here. I'm from Madrid, from the India Food Institute. I'm a postdoctoral researcher, and I've been doing some small projects applying citizen science, and I want to do more. Basically, I want to implement more citizen science strategies into my work, my research. I work in an institute that is focused on precision nutrition, and my main research is in microbiome. So I study gut microbiome and how food and diet can modulate the microbiome, and how we can do things to have a good gut and a good and happy gut. So yes, my idea is try to do activities and promote different aspects to have a better intestinal health.
And don't worry, we will have another network meeting actually in December. It will just be a bit to wrap up of the year. And then we'll also announce another workshop series and training for 2025. So this is not the end of the network in itself.
Okay.
The last training.
Yes, the last training meeting, but we will have a feedback session where it'll be great to get just, feedback from our members, how they have benefited, what their experiences have been like, and whatever ideas or suggestions they have going forward to the next year's meeting plans. Because right now we're just kind of compiling or composing based on member needs. what sort of training topics and themes would be relevant to most members. So I think we have Barbara with us now. Hello, Barbara. Are you able to hear us? And if you could try to turn on your video if you're able to.
I think she sent an email and she had a hard time. It's the first time that's happening to connect her video and microphone. So I would suggest that maybe Tarcísio, you can just start. It will be a 10-minute presentation, and then hopefully Barbara will be able to join in. But really nice to meet you all. Thanks for joining. So just maybe a bit more about the network of researchers. It's this is our 9th training series, as Pooja just mentioned, and we will have a mailing list launching soon. So that will be kind of to facilitate discussion between network members. And next we'll have another meeting in December, and in this meeting we'll be able to tell you a little bit more about our evaluation around the network, maybe a bit more information about who you are, also the level of expertise, etc., just to provide more information. So Tarcísio, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Let me just share my screen. It's okay, everyone can see it. Perfect. So yeah, I'm Tarcísio. I'm a Brazilian researcher, but now I'm based on Europe. I have been working with insects that transmitted diseases and use them as a tool to advance in some social agenda. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the transformative impact of citizen science on mitigating emerging diseases through the FleboCollect project, which was part of my PhD in Madrid, Spain. And to start, I want to quickly talk about sandflies. This tiny insect here that is a big challenge for the global health because they can transmit this parasite called Leishmania through the bites. And Leishmania parasites can cause a group of very dangerous diseases called Leishmaniasis that historically poses as a challenge not just for animal health, but also the human health. And Leishmaniasis is growing in the light of global changes, is emerging and re-emerging in a lot of countries in the world. And in the European context, Spain stands out for being the country that recorded the largest outbreak of this disease on the continent. And because the sandfly, the insect, is the key element in the transmission of the parasites, vector surveillance programs are fundamental. Because through these programs, we can understand where the sandflies are, and through this information, we can plan control strategies. So the World Health Organization launched the Global Vector Control Response aligned with Sustainable Development Goals. So the sustainable surveillance programs gain great prominence and has established some important pillars, such as the improvement of surveillance and monitoring of sandflies and other insect vectors as well, public engagement and mobilization, and also the expansion and integration of approaches. And for this, citizen science is emerging as a big tool to advance in this topic. And the FleboCollect initiative is the first in the world to use citizen science as a tool to face leishmaniasis. The idea is to carry out a community-based monitoring of sandflies, mobilizing the non-academic community. And to do this, we first developed a new trap based on a commercial one. So to capture the sandflies, use the FleboCollect trap. Here, there is a light that attracts the sandflies. Below the light, there is a fan that sucks into a bag and does not allow it to escape. But what's really new about this trap is that made mainly from recycled materials, which had a huge impact on its production cost. And interestingly, this trap works better than the commercial one. And also, it's do-it-yourself, it's handmade, and these characteristics permits the participants to join the project in the making and use of these traps. So we open a call for participation in the whole country, in Spain, focused first on the educational centers in Madrid. The idea was for the project be like put inserts in the curriculum, school curriculum, in the school grade, in subjects like biology or robotics, for example. But you also open a call for the general public using social media and using spaces such as fairs and museums. And the participants join us in a workshop where we first introduce them the sandfly word. So what is this insect? What is Leishmaniasis? And why this is important to us? Then we followed in a group activity where they could make their own trap. And they also receive a didactic guide that helping them to differentiate sandflies from other insects and a step-by-step guide on how to set up a trap and how to store your collected insects. And after this, they can use an app where they could register the trap with geographic coordinates, a photo of the choice, and of course, the number of sandflies found. After this, the participants were sending the biological samples, the insects that were collected to the university. And after a biological check by experts, we were able to create a map, a distribution, sandfly distribution map. Also, if you point your cell phone right now to this code, you can check this map. I believe that this presentation will be shared with the network, so you can check this later if you want. But yeah, if you click on the items, you can see all the traps that were installed. We can see where the sandflies are. And for us, it was super important that this information was just freely accessible, not just for the citizens, scientists, but also for the general public. The FleboCollect project, we're able to involve to impact more than 1,900 people. Collectively, we build more than 300 traps, and we capture more than 1,000 sandflies. We had 20 educational centers join us in the project in 7 different cities across Spain, especially in Madrid. And more than 90% of the participants, they came from school community. They were school students, which led us to believe that implementing citizen science programs in schools can be feasible and effective, benefiting not just like the researchers, but the students as well, the school community as well. And also give us with this huge question, which is how to really engage adults and general public into scientific research, at least on this topic. With this project, we were able also to create a new series, a material for engage our youngest audience. This material is also freely accessible. You can access through this code. Oh, this is super nice. So the citizens found 4 different species of sandflies, all of them with medical importance. But here we highlight Phlebotomus perniciosus, which is the most widespread and dangerous species on Europe, not just for Leishmania parasites, but also for some viruses. And this information gives us a much broader vision on health situation, on sandfly distribution, and it's just helpful to prevention epidemics. So this is the public engagement turning into concrete actions, causing a really important health impact. And which is quite special for our group is that this initiative brings people and science closer, helping to change in the idea that science can be made by just some white men in glasses, but actually can be made by everyone. So this is a important steps towards to science democratization and society's autonomy. And the FleboCollect project is in its pilot phase. We have a lot to grow, but it already shows potential in data collection and optimization. at the same time that bridges the gap between scientists and society with cooperation and co-responsibility aligned with the sustainable development goals. Before I finish, I just want to thank my FleboCollect team. We are a small group, but very motivated. And a special thanks to my kids, citizens, scientists, who brought so much love and joy to this work. And thank you so much for your attention. Here's my contact. I want to give also a special thanks for Pojo and Clea. I'm just new into this group, so thank you for the opportunity to present my work. And I'm available now for questions and comments if you have some. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tarcísio. I think we will leave for the questions afterwards. Barbara was able to connect, so hi, Barbara.
Perfect.
Nice to
So
see you
I'll stop share
online.
my.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes,
Oh, it
all good.
worked. Oh, good.
Hear
A
you.
restart
Thank you.
sometimes helps.
Yes.
It does.
It does.
Let me give a brief, an introduction, and then we'll start your presentation, Barbara.
Perfect.
So, here's Barbara Kieslinger, who's a senior scientist at the Center for Social Innovation in Vienna. She's been engaged in and studying citizen science for many years and working on evaluation and impact assessment. And she contributed to her first white paper on citizen science in Europe. Her research concerns citizen science and citizen innovation, open science, and the relation between technological, digital, and social innovation. She's a guest editor of the Citizen Science in Theory and Practice journal. She's also a consortium member in the ECS project focusing on impact, and recently launched the impact working group at EXA, which I see in the slides will also be published later on. So go right ahead, Barbara. You're muted.
We can't hear you, Barbara.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All good.
Yes, I'm trying to share my screen now, and I hope that also works.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you. Go ahead.
Just the slides. Oh, all good, all set. Yes, thanks again for this invitation. And I'm going to talk briefly now a bit about impact assessment. And let's actually, if I move on. Now, see, now I can move on, but it's a bit too fast. If I see you look here at what would I want to talk about, but please also then, I'm open for questions and comments. So just a little bit of why and what is actually evaluation impact assessment in citizen science and why we talk about it, a little bit of theoretical embedding, where we come from, and then some insights from practice, also models that are being used, frameworks, some tools for data collection, and then a Q&A. So let's see, what and why. Everybody probably, if you do research, you also would probably do some research evaluation. So we want to assess also the achievements, see whether we achieve our objectives. That's why we do research evaluation. This can be done internally or externally. The focus can be on the process or on the results. The responsibility can be either on the project management, on the funders, on the institutions. Definitely it has to be really planned, and there need to be resources for it. So evaluation and impact assessment shouldn't be just an afterthought, but it has to be built in on research from the very beginning. That's what I would really like to stress here. So when you start thinking about a research project, it's also important to think about how to do the evaluation and impact assessment. And I will come to these current popular frameworks that are currently being used, like the theory of change and the logic model. And a little bit again, setting the terminology, because it's often a bit mixed, So, evaluation is really a systematic assessment of either the operations or the outcomes or both of an activity or a program, and usually set against, you know, explicit or implicit standards or criteria. Like you would from the very beginning say, what do you want to reach? And then you create a strategy and a systematic framework for assessing whether you are reaching these goals or not. And often it's distinguished between formative evaluation and summative evaluation. So in the formative one, you would focus more on the process, and it can be very iterative, you know. So you would see what's going right, especially in citizen science, you know. Am I doing the engagement? Am I with the participants? Are there any hiccups? So, you know, you can reflect on those things if you take moments in checking back, for example, with your group, and you really want to improve your research process, so to say, in engaging with different stakeholders. On the other hand, the more summative evaluation is focusing then on the outcomes. So it's the outcome-based evaluation, whether you have really reached the goals that you have set for yourself and for your stakeholders. So a bit more into this, if you compare these two, the formative one is process-based, I already said, and the summative is more outcome-based. The one is kind of, you could also understand it as a more monitoring and quality assurance, quality assessment process, while the other one is more evaluating your achievements. In the formative, there's also, like, you know, usually feedback loops, so you have still time to improve your process. While in the summative one, you already want to look into how will your outcomes, or how is the potential impact that you create with your activities. Yes, in formative, you can then identify the strengths and the weaknesses. That, as I mentioned already, continuously during the runtime of the project, or you have certain points in time where you say would do that, and it's really to improve also the process while still running. While the other one is then providing evidence for change, and typically done more towards the second half or towards the end of a program, and mostly used for showing the impact to the stakeholders. So this already brings me then to impact. So summative evaluation is also associated with impact assessment. And what is it actually when we talk about impact? So impact in this research is then in generally is often referred to as the non-academic consequences arising from your research. So it's not where your specifically research data that you were collecting, but it's more about, you know, effects that your research would also have. For example, on, again, if we talk about citizen science, on your participants or any other stakeholders you engaged with, on society, on maybe the economy, on the ecology. So this is something, you know, the consequences, and it's often normatively defined. It can be, you know, it's demonstrable or perceptible benefits to individuals, groups, organizations, and society. That it can also include human and non-human actors. And in present and future, often when we're in research projects, it's difficult to assess the real impact assessment in the term of already showing impact, because impact is usually long-term, you know. And it is, however, causally linked to the research. Yes, and so impact assessment in research projects is like assessing the significance and reach of the effects of your research. I'd like to stress, I mean, we often think about the positive effects. It could already, your impact can also be negative. So your research, while it might be good and with good intentions to affect a certain number of people, in a positive way, it could also have negative consequences for others. And that's also important to consider. It can have different time horizons, as we said, different social scales, and etc. And of course, multiple domains. And for example, in citizen science, here just a few examples. It can have also wide-ranging indicators, but you know, that's also for any other research area. Just mention them here for social sciences, because that's where we are very active, me and my colleagues. So if we look, for example, where can our research have an impact. And this is really very broad, you know, as you see. I mean, of course, everybody's talking about the SDGs, and we have also seen already nice studies where citizen science has confirmed that they have, you know, that we're contributing with citizen science to certain SDGs. But as we see here, I mean, the spectrum is really broad, from economic to social, cultural, environmental, health issues. And I would just like to stress here, when you want to plan impact, and you should of course plan impact assessment for any of your research, you should focus and concentrate on something, you know, because it is, if you plan it in from the very beginning, it takes time, it takes resources, and you probably cannot cover all of this. But you should see where the strengths of your project are, and let's say the social impact is probably the most prominent one, then you would focus on this aspect, but not on all of them. But I'm just mentioning here, so it is really broad, and you can have effects on many different levels and in many different areas. And then this typical theory for the planning also of impact assessment or impact in is the theory of change. And there you would start, you know, with an impact, creating an impact vision. And this theory of change is actually, it describes why an intervention is leading to a certain result. So you would start from the goal of what impact you want to reach, and then you would also define, for example, the different parameters around it, and you would show, and it helps you to show how this change happens, you know. So it is a kind of a working tool that you can use, but you would start from it's a kind of a from defining first already what kind of impact should be coming out at the end. So it's also helps you structure from the very beginning your interventions, and what kind of paths you can take to reach those. While the logic model is more a logical sequence. So the logic model is often applied when you already have a program. Like in our research studies, we often already have a program, we already have activities defined, and then from there we would see what kind of outputs are we creating, on what kind of what kind of outcomes and impacts are they leading. So if I go to the next one, just a bit more of these wordings. So input is usually the resources that you have available, for example, at a project start. Then you would do your activities, you know, for example, with your citizens, to collect your data or to co-define with them the research. The output is what you really create from there. This can be reports, data sets, etc. And then the outcome is something that you would already make use of. So it's already short and mid-term effects, I would say. Also, it could be if you want to assess if people learn something while they participate with you, then you could already show, oh yes, I had a, you know, that they already confirmed that they had a knowledge gain, for example, or they gained new skills. But the impact is really long-term. I'd like to stress that. So impact is really long-term, and that's why we always struggle, because it's so difficult within the project time. It's hard to really say. You cannot often directly measure the impact, but it's often you could get indications that this outputs will be taken up, lead to outcome, and lead to impact. So, but as I said, it's really usually long-term and beyond our typical frameworks of 3 years or something where we often operate in. So a bit more into practice now about how what we did. This is a work that's already been published for quite a few years now. Is we tried to come up with a framework to structure a bit how we can approach all this and these dimensions of evaluation in citizen science. Again, you will see it's again formative based and summative based. So the one is more focusing on the process and feasibility. You can use that for planning, and the other part is more used for outcomes and impact. So we put it there on 3 levels, like the scientifics. Let's say you want to look at the scientific dimension of your project, and you could look into, what scientific objectives do you have? What kind of data are you producing? Or what kind of cooperation synergies do you have? If you want to look more into impact on the participants, you could see, have they gained any new knowledge? Is there behavioral change? Because this is in citizen science, quite a few projects also want to have the goal also to change certain behavior of citizens to be, for example, more environmentally conscious or different kind of objectives. And then there is also the broad, actually quite broad final line here that's called socio-ecological and economic. There's a lot of mixed into it, but there again you could focus on certain things. Let's say you want to look at the ecological impact, or you want to look at the societal impact, you want to look at the innovation impact, the technological one. So this is a way to structure it, again according to formative and summative evaluation, and then according to different impact areas, so to say. So just a typical example, I mean, what we also do, of course, our funders especially are interested in numbers. You could always then assign KPIs to this. This is just one example in terms of scientific, of course. It's again the old story of saying how many journals did we write, how many journal contributions did we write, or how many data sets did we produce, or how many new methodologies did we come up with. But on the participant side, you can also count, of course, you can say the number of people engaged, the number of contributions that came from the citizens, the number of people continuing, and they say then if you ask them at the end, do you want to continue in citizen science? Or in the third one, the number of policy briefs or so. So there is a lot where you could set for yourself KPIs. The other one, what we often do is defining with our participants from the beginning what they want to achieve, or what could be expectations, and not necessarily numbers, but this is often also something more qualitative, like the expected change that they want to see at individual level, the personal impact of the participants, the social goals, is there the responsibility for natural environment. So these are all more fuzzy terms, so to say. It's often also more difficult to put that into figures. So that's why for assessing those effects, we often use more, as I said, qualitative instruments, or like storytelling and interviews. But this is something, that we always add on to purely KPIs in terms of counting numbers. And this is how a typical logical model works, where we would also add, for example, the internal and external factors. So you could also call them risks. So you can expand that model if you wish, and then you can also use it more as a monitoring tool. This is just to give you an example, one that we defined for our project, where we're together with Pusha and Clea, for example, in the ECS project, where we have activities where, for example, we say we want to reach some social or societal impact. And that's why we moved, and we kind of tried to align our activities, defining what kind of output they would generate, and then what would the outcome be in a midterm, and what kind of impact we want to reach. So this is just one example. And then we also look at internal and external factors to be prepared if things change there, that you would also have to adapt your impact assessment strategy, or you would at least see, why certain things don't go in such a linear way, because maybe your external factors were changing. Yes, again, this is another example from the ECS project, as I said before. So we have our impact areas where we say we have, for example, we want to make change in the scientific aspect or in the economic one, in the social one, and then we defined KPI indicators for that. And this is, for example, I mean, the KPIs are, I mentioned that already, always nice also to communicate to funders, and it's a good way to check, you know, are we really on track in terms of how many we engage or how many we want to reach. But then we also have, again, the alternative metrics where it becomes much more fuzzy, so to say. It doesn't cannot be covered again just by counting, but it's more, can we show that there has been a growing interest in citizen science, that we have in terms of social inclusion, which is one big topic for us. How can we show that there is a feeling of inclusion or a feeling of being heard by our participants? Do they feel more recognized? Do we have an increased awareness amongst policymakers? And for those things, you need different instruments, right? Than for the standard KPIs. This is just to show you that there are various frameworks and resources. The first one is the one that I showed you, where we published an evaluation framework as a few years ago already, 2018. The Action Project developed a canvas to assess impact assessment of citizen science projects. The Mix online platform has like a very sophisticated and kind of a longish tool to assess impact, to do impact assessment, but you could also focus there on choose a specific area where you want to have a deeper dive into it. There is Time for Citizen Science is a special framework, for example, to measure institutional change. And then we have a MOOC on EU citizen science, also about evaluation in citizen science. And then I just mentioned here another guiding principles for impact assessment in citizen science, again, another publication. But this is just to give you an example, and there's so much more. It really depends on what's the impact that you want to measure, know what you think you want to focus on, and then you would go for the right instrument. Just to say here, there is, again, it's not rocket science then to do evaluation impact assessment. The data collection tools are, standard kind of, the qualitative one in terms of interviews, workshops, focus groups, or content analysis then. And if you have, data collected, or the quantitative one in terms of, questionnaires, experience sampling, workshop evaluations, and then also things that you would get out of platforms that you use, for example, your access of access statistics, the participant number, etc. So this is, really standard tools that are collected. It really depends on the strategy that you define for doing an impact assessment. Here, one example of a very qualitative one is that we have, for example, in ECS, just recently published a book on impact stories. So what did we do there? We collected, we did 12 interviews on the one hand with people who were doing citizen science activities with an inclusion focus, and on the other hand, also those covering countries where citizen science is growing a lot. So with these interviews, we had a specific interview guidelines. We asked specific questions. What has changed through these activities? Why was there improvement? Who was impacted, and what were drivers and barriers, for example. And with these, we then put them into this booklet. But then what I also wanted to say, there is a working group at the moment about impact assessment, an EXA working group. And this working group is putting together, they have like 4 subgroups, sub-working groups. It's just being established now. And one of them wants to come forward with a kind of a toolbox or a toolkit, or kind of at least I think a collection, so that it would be easier to find already guidelines and tools available to do impact assessment, because there is already quite a lot out there, but it's a bit scattered. You would find resources on our ECS platform, of course, but it's and also many institutions have already some guidelines, for example, how you assess the impact on participants, or also some societal impact. But it's yeah, the working group, and the working group is open, so if anybody also wants to join, here's also where to register. It just started, so it's still time to join. But hopefully there will be then, I don't know in which time frame, but there will be then a kind of a toolkit available. And just to finish off, I don't know how I'm doing with time, but it's my message would really be, we rushed quite quickly through this, and there's so much details we can go into, but evaluation and impact assessment should not be an afterthought. It's really something that you have to build in from the very beginning. And probably you can't do everything, but it's really rather saying what is the main, what are the main aspects where I want to create impact over. I think this research is also creating impact, and then go for a strategy and think through it from the very beginning, because otherwise at the end you might think, oh, but I should have already you know, implemented certain processes before, to making sure that then I can later show the impact. And it's also, and the evaluation of the process, of course, is also super helpful, and should be also planned in from the beginning. Yes, and I think with that, I'm already finished. And happy to go more into detail about the questions. I got your questions or requests that you sent in before. I hope I covered some of them. There were the questions about indicators and about resources on impact assessment or societal impact. What could that look like? So I tried to put all that in a little bit. There was a question about standardized impact assessment. We, at least when we practice, in our practice, we always adapt the impact assessment to the certain project, because at least that's my personal opinion, I find it difficult to apply exactly the same indicators and the same strategies across different projects, unless they're very similar, have similar objectives. But we usually do some customization, so to say. Okay, but actually probably I just give the floor now to people who want to come in and ask questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. That was very informative, especially after attending one of the working group meetings earlier this week. It was super informative. And just to put it out there, like, I might be using the impact stories in another project as well. And I would love to, I mean, right now, I don't want to take the space for questions from the audience, but maybe in time, I would love to understand the analysis behind the impact story as well, because that's not something we went deeper into. Of course, qualitative assessments, but there's got to be some guideline for that as well, and could be more ambiguous that way to kind of take out the actual impact from those stories. Although I did hear that they are very tailored questions, so very specific questions, but still, if you have anything to add. But for now, I'm going to give the floor to the audience. If anybody has any comments, questions, please. Yes, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Barbara. That was really great. And I love the idea that there's going to be a working group that puts this all together, because I agree there's a lot of information out there, but it's scattered. So that'd be wonderful. I just wanted to ask you, in your experience, are funders now, let's say you're doing an impact assessment and you don't want to do the quantitative at all. I mean, you spoke of mixing the two, but how prepared or how willing are funders to take qualitative, like storytelling, as a scientific impact and take it seriously?
I can only, I work mostly in European funded projects. I have to say. And there I see that they definitely still want numbers as well, because even they have it in their reporting system. So we do send them also, like, for example, this impact stories booklet. I'm sure that the funders will also like that. And internally, so to say, or to convince again others, they like also the stories, so they can tell stories, but they also want to have that backed up with numbers. And in these European research funding reports in the portal, they ask us even more for numbers now than what they did before. So I'm afraid that only the qualitative assessment is not enough. That's my personal experience so far. But yeah, I mean,
Thanks,
they're
Barbara. Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question?
We had one in the chat by Pankaj, I think.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Pankaj,
Sorry.
would you like to unmute yourself and jump in the discussions?
Yeah, my question was, you talk about impact assessment, and so where do you assess the skills, which are generated out of the citizen science?
Okay, yes. So the skills, again, depending on the project. But for example, we have been involved in a few citizen science projects where we were working with schools, and there we basically we did it with questionnaires. So the depending on the age, we had some pre-questionnaires. We were asking about certain knowledge in terms of the subject that was being treated, like air quality, but also in terms of very broad, so to say, research methodologies, or whether they knew what research was, etc. And then engaging them for a certain number of time. And later on, there was another questionnaire coming back to that, so have they learned anything on the subject? Have they learned any skills? And there are already standardized questionnaires for that. Cornell University also has quite an elaborate catalog, I think, of assessing, and how far participants have gained any knowledge and skills. So there is already quite some good work that has been applied across different kind of projects, and there are guidelines available.
Thank you. I had another inquiry for the previous presentation. When you were collecting insects in that pack, so what are the minimum and the maximum number of insects which were collected?
You're asking like in one trap, for example?
Yeah.
This is very different for each region. For example, in some traps, you found more than 100 sandflies, and some traps you found just one. So it depends a lot of the sandflies population in each location.
So within that location, if you found one fly, do you have to repeat that again? Like if somebody wants to re-perform that activity at their own institution, like if you get one fly that does not give a very good, example of, population diversity. So will that be repeated again, or it will be just counted as one?
The idea is for the citizens putting like again and again and again. If you put more, the better. So then you can have this understanding, which helping here in Europe that the sandfly will have like a season. So it's more in the summer, so you can be more controlled about that. So have this peak population and then it comes down. But yeah, the intention is that the student, they can use this for the whole summer at least. Then you can have a better idea about the locations.
I wanted to mention also, Pankaj, have you tried already to link to skills? Have you already tried to do that? And if so, how?
Which one are you mentioning? Ever tried any activity?
Yeah, well, around your question about assessing impact of skills generated by citizen science.
Yes, I did.
You did? And
Not
you
not exactly the activities which have been presented, but there's a activity called BioBlitz from National Geographic Society. So which I have conducted in person and online both, and which requires students to, you know, have assessment of skills like before you get into that activity, and that is, like inquiry-based questions. And then when they're doing the activity, they work individually, and then they work in a group of peer, and then they work in group of like a team of 4. So by doing that, going through the process of knowledge, and they attain skills, and that is a very good time by observations, and with the time they complete that task, it certainly helps in evaluation of their skills. And then once they completed that activity, I also gave them a questionnaire, like a survey, to know what they used to feel about the biodiversity and what they feel now, where else they will be able to apply that, what differently they could do now and before. So I had like more qualitative responses of students rather than quantitative.
That's very, very interesting because based on what Barbara was saying earlier with the school students, my mind was actually thinking, and to be utterly honest, Clea and I have been thinking how to understand knowledge gained, even when we perform these network meetings, because the idea for us is to spread an awareness and knowledge about citizen science. But how do you gauge that? So Pankaj, what you mentioned, if I understand correctly, is that you assess their experience, but also the actual knowledge based on how much time they're taking in doing certain activities, group activities. And do you give them like question answer format as well to assess knowledge?
So I used, apart from like, having the student experiences, while, that was a survey, after they completed the activity, I had a worksheet while they were collecting certain evidences. And then that worksheet acted like a knowledge-driven skill assessment exercise. And all of those are available with the NGC website. So it's like a pre-made questionnaires and activities to assess their knowledge and as well as skills. And I could also see a lot of difference in student experiences when they conducted that in person, and then online format. That was the time of COVID. I could see their explorations were more in experiencing or collecting data from all over the world. But when they were doing those activities on the campus in person, they just wanted to think about the local community. So there was a very different thought process the student could establish, and the experiences were varied.
And that kind of gives light to there's so many variables affecting every individual, and with such projects, it's so difficult because even the starting knowledge then should be similar for the group who's involved in this. And then when it comes to assessment, and there's a question to you as well, Barbara, would it be, so if you have candidate A, are you going to track their progress individually and then do an average of all the candidates? Or do you average, like, I'm a little bit confused. I've never done this. I haven't worked with humans. I've only worked with mice. So it's hard to understand, especially with these kind of things where we're not actually starting with the same knowledge level. We're not starting with the same mental cognitive efficiency either. So every individual have a different rate of progressing. So how do you account for these kind of variability?
Yeah, thanks for that question, actually, because I think it's so nice to hear, that I mean, humans are not mice, and that's something I feel that even some people, when they assess our review publications, they forget that. Because just yesterday, my colleague told me in one of the projects where we were working with actually was that I don't remember if it was school children or was even via Zooniverse, so with adults. So they were actually at first sending in a questionnaire where before starting the activities, you know, and so you would get at least, you know, a level of knowledge where they would stand when they start. And there were indicators, but again, with all respecting all the data privacy, that you would know who that person is, but they would get a certain stamp or whatever, a number. If we do it in questionnaire with students, they would, you know, get a code or so. And then if you ask them later on, if you do the post questionnaire, you would have to be able to, they would have to remember, or somehow in the system with Suniverse it was okay, because then they were sent the same survey again, and so you could at least match, you know, so you would have the pre and the post questionnaire from the same people, and then you could see whether there were any changes, how the trajectory was going. But I mean, for example, we just got another comment from a reviewer, but that's not valid because we didn't have a control group. And my very personal assistant on this is, you know, we humans are not mice, for example, or, you know, we are humans, and I don't really want to have a control group, you know, because in that sense, it doesn't seem ethical to me, because I, you know, just for proving a research that via citizen science somebody can learn something, I don't want to have a control group who I don't let participate in an activity, you know, while the others I do. So just for my study purposes, using other people who would have to fill in the survey for me, and that they don't even do anything, and then I want to measure them as well. I have really personal issues with that, and I don't find that ethical, because I think if you do it already with a pre and a post questionnaire, and you can see changes in the group that you have been working with, then you can say there was an effect on it, right? So, but yes, I mean, it's really depending on where people come from, what research education they had for discipline, and it is, of course, seen very differently in different disciplines. So it's a very open field, I would say. Yes, but a great question.
How did it go with the reviewer?
No.
Wow, because I think then the medicine should have even more ethical concerns when it comes to literally life and death, the disease and health of patients by having placebos. Yeah, that's very interesting. I've never heard that argument before. And actually stating it as part of research, that's very, very interesting. And that's also fascinating about citizen science, that people actually do think about people, of the benefit of people genuinely, rather than just focusing on the scientific results and quantitative analysis. That's very interesting. Thank you.
I mean,
Clear.
I don't think that's always the case, but it can be.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much to both. It's 1 o'clock. I'd love to hear more actually from your reflections from the impact assessment, etc. But yeah, time is up. So hopefully see you next on our next training meeting, which will not be a thing, but a bit of a wrap up and kind of letting you know what we have in next year, starting January onward. Thank you very much, Tarcísio and Barbara, coming on board and presenting about your work and talking about the impact. It's really been fascinating and very interesting to see. And yeah, thank you everyone else for coming.
Thank you as well. And yes, we'll be sending out information regarding our mailing list very soon, which will be a forum where people can interact, members can interact with each other, share knowledge, experiences around citizen science and their own projects as well. So, and of course, as you all know, you can always reach out to Clea and I, and we are here to chat, you know, Rick, answer to your queries, etc. And as we mentioned earlier, we will be sharing the recordings from the entire year, including the resources, slides, and summaries of these meetings. So we'll be sharing all that resources with you very soon. Clear?
Yeah, and I want to share with you now in the chat. This is the document. It's an open source document where there's all the list of questions we've crowdsourced so far for all the topics that we've done. So this, you'll see this is maybe where your question is. We're also crowdsourcing answers. So if you have any relevant colleagues or you yourself feel comfortable to answering some of these questions, please feel free to do so. yeah, so this is part of also of our training material that we're trying to combine, and it could also be informative to anyone that is giving a training in that topic, what people are kind of. So thanks also, Barbara, for keeping these in consideration for your presentation, and also for everyone asking them. That's it.
All right. Thank you once
Thank you
again,
very
and have a lovely weekend. Thank you,
All
Barbara.
the best.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.